Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to another episode of Love Reading, and I'm Najman Sari, and I'm going to take you through another book around the Quran, and it's called Discovering the Quran: A Contemporary Approach to a Veiled Text, and it's by Robinson. He's also not a Muslim author, but I found, like I shared with Michael Sells, he's another author who I found has done a very good job of empathy. So, you can also pick up books, and as soon as any warpedness or anything unsavory, it puts you off reading. And so let me just share with you a background. When I was at university, we did a course on speed reading. And so I was able to read very fast, the skimming, all of that. And then they would have a questionnaire at the end. Question answers, or what did you get from the passage that you read? And invariably, I would get the 80s, the 90s. And I'm sharing it in the sense that because whatever I read, I was able to do. One time I got less than 50, and the teacher too. And I immediately, as I read it and I answered it, and I told my lecturer, I said, I didn't like what I was reading. So he said, well, that's why you weren't able to answer. So in other words, what doesn't connect and resonate for you, you have trouble reading. Whether it's reading, whether it's other things, it just nauseates us. Now, having to read about LGBT, this and that, it just gets your goat of why should I be doing it? And then it's not politically correct, so you can't say anything about that. But if you want to approach the Quran, or telling university students to read that, that's a problem. So this hypocritical thing of the West is just something to abhor, but it's okay. We need to get our own ground strengthened by knowing what we're reading, what literature we have available to us, and so on. So here, coming to this book I love this one too, Discovering the Quran, and Neil Robinson. So, and like I told you, read the preface or the preface, read the introduction. So he's actually given you, he said part one is to do with this, how the Muslims view the Quran, how they do it, how even the sounds, how it comes to them. So he says it's done in, the first part is to show how it's experienced by Muslims within their community of faith, and not least the acoustic qualities of the text and the context in which it is heard, the part it plays in learning by heart. So he's given all that in the first. The second part, he says, is divided on the chronology, the relationship between the Quran and the earliest biographies done on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the resources that determine when those surahs came down. The third part is about the structure and the coherence, and showing that there is a structure which seems random and arbitrary sometimes, but there is a particular order, and he, mashallah, has managed to have a look at that. And so he says, okay, so it's not just a novel to read. It is a bit more detailed. So if if you want to maybe skip certain chapters for a layman, you could maybe do that. And but for sure, read his introduction, his conclusion, and concluding remarks, and so. And that's just the standard. Usually, always go to the introduction. I'll share with you what I enjoyed best out of the book. You see, also when non-Muslims write about how we love the Quran and how our development of a Huffaz literature or history and how that happened, or chronology, a lot of that we are familiar with. So I usually like skipping over it. What I found very pertinent is his. He talks about the structure too, and that sort of is a bit similar to what Michael Sells, and maybe they might have referred one to the other. The bit that I found very relevant is him talking about the grammar and the discourse of how in the Quran we have Allah's talking in first person, and then he moves on to third person, and then he moves on to first person. So it's here. And look how, to be academically correct, this is what he said, it's not my purpose here to discuss whether the Quran is genuinely the word of Allah, or whether it's just angelic speak, or whether it's his own a revelation. I am concerned in analyzing the Quranic discourse which will be acceptable to the believer and unbeliever. So again, he's unpacking the text of the Quran of how it should be. You can make up your own mind. But he says that when there is a shift in gear on Allah talking from the first person to a third person, there is a rhyme and reason for it. And I got it from his book also, but also from our own, that, there's the royal we. The royal we talks about when Allah keeps you at a distance. Then sometimes, like in Surah An-Naba, Amma Yatasalun Anin Naba'il Azim, they ask you. So he's not, when he's angry, Allah is never referring directly to the kuffar. He's saying, this is what they ask you, but they're listening in. So these changes of iltifat, I think they're called, of how the person changes, that in itself shows you where the attention is going. And so I'm just trying to look for it again. Yes, so that I was at the right place, and then I lose my place, 224, about the dynamics of the implied reader, both as we and he. So we sometimes have it that sometimes in the Quran Allah talks about we, and then he shifts into he. And then sometimes he shifts into, he starts with we, and then coming onto it, he comes into I. So all of that, he's able to, this is what I find then really the remarkable work, that they actually, again, highlight and detail where the shifts occur. We don't do that. We don't look at our Quran in that detail. We don't look at it. But then he says that, he's talking about I and we, and then moving into he and she, the implied speaker with embedded speakers. So it is a bit detailed. I'm also not able to present it to you, but it shows you when Allah talks about it with you, and when he talks about up to our Rasulullah, the compassion and the closeness. And when it's remote, sometimes Allah just talks about all the things. This is again in the 30th juz of the small surahs, of the 30th ones, about this will happen, that will happen. And sometimes the passive is used. The passive is used to highlight that this is done, but it's not bringing Allah in the picture. But this is going to happen. So that changes is what, from the third person singular to the first person singular, what that does and how it does it. So it makes impact. And from the third person singular, Allah is using it to the first person, and so on. So even within one ayah, it shifts. So he's trying to give you a rhyme and reason for that. And we have to go into it again, but it's a double thing that I want you to just appreciate how much non-Muslims have been able to do in-depth study on our Quran, on ourselves, in a empathetic manner, not in order to find faults in it. So that shift from Islamophobia, from Orientalism, to somebody being more nuanced. And again, he said the same thing, Michael Self. He said, I'm not there to tell you that the Quran is from Allah or not. That in itself can put us off and say, well, just jump in the lake. We know it's from Allah. So, but beyond that, they've written it with so much depth, and in a way given us information about ourselves. So me to be ashamed of myself, look, we didn't know that, and he's done so much depth of learning. And alhamdulillah, Allah has provided this book for it being a research topic for them, and may they be guided. I just pray for both these authors, and may they come to our faith, because they brought such wealth in it. And then he goes on, which I also enjoyed, he went all the way to Pakistan, to Lahore, if I'm not mistaken, to talk about, there's another mufassir there, which if I get a chance we will discuss him too, Amin Hasan Islahi, and he goes and he talks to him through interpreter or whatever, and he says, so, and he took his insights, what Islahi says, what he wants to say, so he puts that down to it, and I found that very relevant because he's going to an authentic Muslim source and seeing how he and being able to give what he gave in Urdu, explanation of Islahi, into English, for the English leadership more and more. There is stuff, but it was, I just found it lovely that as an author, he's able to not just go to the Western Orientalist, Naldiki, and other people who are the standard reference points for the Orientalist when they're discussing on the Quran, but he goes to sources like this, Amin Hasan Islahi, Maulana Amin Hasan Islahi in Lahore, and gets his view of how he looks at the Quran, the coherence, how it moves from here to there. So I find that also another beautiful resource, and this is what it looks like, Discovering the Quran from NRobinson. And again, it's a good it is actually like Michael Sells, they are detailed books, or like the At-Tanweer fi Isqat al-Tadbir, the Sufi book on by Iskandari. They are detailed books, but nonetheless, you can draw an overview from them that this is the kind of depth of learning literature that we have in our faith. And for those, if we're towards the tail end of Ramadan, when maybe we are staying up at night, we are in khalwa, or we are sitting in itikaf, all this reading works as part of ibadah, of enhancing our learning, enhancing knowing what is there. And there's always something to learn somewhere, even the tiniest book that you pick up. So I just hope somewhere within all these books I'm just sharing offhand, firsthand, hopefully not in a random fashion, in some sort of coherent order, of the books which I think if we look at, we will just have more moments of illumination, more moments of learning, and this is what it says. And then also look at the underlying theme of recognizing what is seen is less than the unseen. The iceberg, tip of the iceberg, a lot underneath, and just strengthening our faith with all that learning. So that's obviously the base point of loving to read, loving to have that confidence of that we're on track, and being able to counter when we get attacked by non-Muslims on various things, to know our history, to validate ourselves on all of those matters. So again, read on him. He has actually been called to write prefaces for others too, and again, just reading who they refer to, the references in the introduction of other people who have made comments for him or others, reference point. That's always useful to know and learn. And so that's as much as I'd like to leave it at. But again, another very good resource to have, not only on the bookshelves, but actually to peruse, to share with others, that if you want to know a greater insight on the Quran, this would be a beautiful book. So this was Discovering the Quran, a contemporary approach to a veiled text, and it was by NRobinson. So with that, I'll leave you for today, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.